Okay. Hello, beautiful ladies. I just want to thank you for joining me for another week of Making Life Beautiful again. I'm just so thrilled to be with you today. I'm here in Tennessee. I'd love to hear where you're from. So go ahead and comment below where you're at right now. Some of you might be at some kind of exotic location for vacation. We want to hear about it. Today I just want to ask you, have you ever felt like you were always in someone else's shadow and always trying to live up to other people's expectations? Because, I know I often have reflected back and know that I can say that I felt like I lived small compared to the grand life that I knew that I wanted. So I'm here to ask you if that is how you feel as well. Because growing up, that was my reality. And today I just want to share with you a little bit about my story and how I broke free from that and learned how to live big. Today the episode, it's all about my journey from living small and quiet to embracing that bold and authentic self that I am. But we will explore just common struggles that we all might feel and the turning points that um, I took to change my life and the steps I took to living my life boldly, but how you also can take those same steps. So, by the end of this episode, you're going to gain a lot of insights and actionable steps to be able to start your own journey of self discovery and living out your greatness and your big, audacious life. So, whether you're feeling overshadowed or stuck in a rut, my story and the tips I will share with you. I hope that they inspire and they empower you to live that big, audacious life because you are meant for more. We were born and put on this earth for way more than what we are experiencing now. And so this is especially for any of you midlife women who have spent many years compromising to fit in. We all do this. And if you've ever felt like you're not living to your true self, or if you've been caught in the comparison trap that often feeds into low self-esteem, this is for you. And we're not going to be able to cover everything under the sun under this topic today, but I want you to know, stick around because over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to provide a lot more information and help you dive deeper into this self-discovery and living your big life. Because by the end, I want you to know exactly who you are and have the courage to start taking the steps to live that life. And, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe today to stay updated for those coming episodes. So let's go ahead and get started. People can't tell from this video screen, because I'm sitting down, but I'm actually a very tall woman. And, not quite 6 feet, I'm 5'11, but growing up, I've been this tall since I was 11 and 12 years old. So as you can imagine, growing up, this had a big impact on my mindset and how I navigated the world, because everywhere I went, I would, I was the giant, And so I found myself standing out just about everywhere I went, and whether I wanted to stand out or not, and I always felt like just that standing out sore thumb, very self-conscious feeling. And on top of that, my parents, they lived really big lives. And my mom was a teacher and later became a principal at the Christian school that I attended. And then my dad, he was heavily involved in local politics. So everywhere I went, it was like my parents were in the spotlight. They volunteered at church for basically every role that there was. And so many people knew who they were. And everywhere I went, I was known as Dave and Marilyn's daughter. And later, this became true, or I thought, let's just be clear on that one. Mindset, I thought that this was also true when I became the twins mom or Jonathan's wife, or, put whatever label you want on it. I was living in the shadow of whatever it was that I deemed was bigger than life. So, I actually look up to my parents, and I think that I love what they stand for and I admire all the dedication they put forth. So I want to be very clear. This isn't about them. This was about me putting myself in a situation where I decided, I somewhere along the way, and I had adopted the motto, I had heard it somewhere, children are meant to be seen and not heard. And I learned it along the pathway, how to hold my tongue, be quiet, sit with your hands folded in your lap, be still. And I learned how to live small and I learned how to live quiet and hidden and insignificant. So, many of you might actually understand this feeling and try um, you may have been able to find yourself trying to fit in with others by living smaller. Whether it's physically, emotionally, or socially, we do this so that we can fit in. It's safer that way. And it's like living with the constant weight on our shoulders, trying to meet these expectations or these rules, because society is always changing the rules. And you end up continually suppressing and suppressing and suppressing who your true self is. So, always feeling like you have to hide a part of yourself just to be accepted or to avoid standing out too much, right? We don't want to be too little, too much, or anything, but that fear of the judgment, of not meeting other people's expectations or not fitting in, it's very paralyzing. Comment below if you have ever done that. I'm almost certain we all can raise our hand on that one, right? And here's the ironic part of all of this. I was actually drawn to bold, loud, very just bigger than life people. And I lived vicariously through them. Little did I know that the real person I was actually meant to be was bold too. So I was attracted to those people who were who I really was at the core. And it took me several years. I'm a little dense on this, but it took me several years to realize this and start actually breaking free from the shadows of all of those people. But what if I told you that trying to fit in and live small is not the answer? I mean, we all know that, right? But what if the very qualities that make you feel out of place are the very qualities that will lead you into your true identity and path? I mean, I want you to let that sink in, because looking back, I can see my height and my parents' big lives. They weren't obstacles, but actually opportunities. And they taught me about strength, presence, authority, the importance of really truly living into oneself. And because they never hid from who they are. And instead of trying to blend in, later on, I began to embrace my unique qualities. And I learned that it's okay to stand out, use my voice, and I want you to know that you can too. So, we are going to be getting in deeply on this, but I want you to real quickly just spend a minute, because it's very important to acknowledge your past, where you're coming from. Like, why did you walk into living small? And so I want you to reflect on your upbringing, identify maybe some moments where you felt overshadowed or silenced, or why you needed to be silenced, why it wasn't safe, or why you were worried about being rejected, because we do, as a humanity, we have reasons for why we do things out of the fear, and it's often tied to survival. Is it safe? Or wanting to be accepted, so definitely sit down and write these down. And I want to just input this right here. Here's a shameless plug. Each episode comes with a corresponding workbook for you to process through these concepts and ideas throughout the week. So if you are worried about missing out and not having a pad of note paper next to you, no worries. You will have a workbook that you can go into the Facebook group and download. So the next thing is, I had all these people that I was looking at in my life, and it's really important to be able to recognize the difference between admiration and imitation, right? Because I I don't need to look at other people and compare myself and try to fit in. And that's what the problem was. I was trying to live small so that I wasn't recognized for being a giant or for being bold or being loud. So, um, but you can definitely admire someone and appreciate them being them true selves. And you don't have to lose your own voice because you appreciate someone else. One of my favorite things to do on this planet is to celebrate other people and to recognize their strengths and their qualities. And by doing that, I find that it helps me, not have to sit in that comparison place, but I really truly can celebrate that we all carry a piece of who the Father God is on this earth, right? So, and then one last thing, it's really, really a good thing. My counselor had me do this a long time ago, and they had me write a letter to my younger self. And in doing this, I was able to acknowledge all of the pressure that I felt, all the pressure that I was under. And I was able to reassure my younger self that it's okay to be different from all of those people in my world that I admired or I wanted to fit in with and I didn't want to be rejected by. It was really okay. And so I want you to take a moment today, or even this week, to just reflect on those unique qualities that make you you. You know, and sometimes we love those qualities, sometimes we hate those qualities, but I want you to embrace them all because they all have a piece. Stop trying to fit in the molds that you want to fit in, or you think you want to fit in, and we'll talk about that later, but they're never meant for you. Stand tall if you're tall. Be bold if you're bold, and start living out that truth. And I say stand tall because that's my story, and bold because that's my story. But you may be someone who is a flowy, graceful person, or you may be the life of the party, or you may be this dynamic person who goes and gets everything done, right? And whatever it is, I want you to start living that truth from that place. So, in this next segment, I'll share the turning point that changed everything for me and how I began to realize my true self and started my journey towards living boldly. And I hope that this could be the very moment and the awakening spark that helps you on your transformational part of your story. So, do you ever feel like you've looked back and you recognize, oh my gosh, I'm totally not living my own life. I don't even know who this person is. I'm not even recognizing myself, you know? And I had one of those moments where I sat and looked at myself and I realized, who am I? What is going on? And so that's what I want to tell you because I went from feeling hidden and not being seen for who I was and being misunderstood constantly to actually discovering my true self, being accepted, being seen, and being recognized for the things that I carry on this earth. And that aha moment, it happened somewhere around 2013. I had several different things happening kind of at the same time that all culminated to create this big aha moment. The Lord always does that, right? And so I was feeling discontent with my looks, with my life. Um, and I was very sad because I was constantly surrounded by people, but I felt totally alone. I felt never seen. And I recognized one day I looked at myself and I was like, man, I'm wearing gray, blah, soccer mom clothes. Now, later I did become a soccer mom, so I want to make that clear. But at the time, I was not a soccer mom. I had no reason to look that way unless if it's what I wanted to do. But somehow when I went shopping, that's I was drawn to hidden, blended blah clothes. And I now know that that was me trying to live small, right? But it didn't match my personality at all. And, I did go at the same time, just being discontent with my life. I went and read a book, took a couple of personality tests. And it's really funny because in these personality tests, each and every single time it came out as saying that I'm this bold, dynamic woman. Now, Here's the crazy part. I was surrounded because in Nashville, if you ever come visit Nashville, that's where I lived at the time. Everyone here is either earthy or this graceful, flowing hipster type style, right? That ain't me. And so I wanted to be this flowing, full of grace, kind of woman. But the reality is, and the truth is, I'm like a bull in china shop, like you can't miss me coming. And so no wonder, as a kid, my mom always signed me up for ballet classes. She needed me to find some way to become graceful and flowy and have that more feminine touch that we all recognize to be tied to a female personality. So, this is the thing. Many women, we struggle with feeling unseen, unappreciated. And what's wild is we often will dress based on our feelings, but we aren't dressing based on who from the inside out, and we end up behaving in ways that don't reflect who we truly are. And it really can come down to our mindsets and where we're coming from. What do we believe about ourselves? What have we told ourselves about ourselves? And in this case, I told you at the beginning, I told myself that I needed to live small. It was the safe place to be. Children are meant to be seen and not heard. And so I ended up growing up that way. But it didn't sync with my personality. And I was so just disheartened, discontent, and I'm sure you feel that way. And maybe it's not living small, but feeling invisible, especially when deep down, you know that there's so much more for yourself, so much more to who you are that people can't see or don't know about you. And maybe feeling misunderstood. The discontent and sadness that I felt, they were just signals. They were red flags that I wasn't living authentically. I want you to comment below if you know what I'm talking about, because I have a feeling a lot of us could pipe up and say, we can see some red flags too. So while I was in the middle of this self-discovery in the 2013 kind of season, I also attended a conference. I referred to it in another episode earlier, but this conference was about focusing on identity, who you are, walking through life as an empowered woman, never needing to compare yourself because you know exactly who you are. And, both the book that I read before, and those personality tests and that conference, they were really, truly foundational in my journey towards living my big life. And I just want to ask, like, what if the key to feeling seen and appreciated lies in embracing who you are rather than trying to fit into that mold that doesn't suit you? We feel like to be seen, we have to become the person that we're talking to be seen by them. But the truth is, what if being bold and dynamic, in my case, is exactly what I needed to feel empowered and be seen and recognized by those people? And I'm saying the same thing about you. These experiences, they actually opened my eyes. I realized that being bold and dynamic wasn't something to be hidden, but actually celebrated. And so that is what's true about you. What is the word? I use the word bold because that's the word that was identified to me in that book and conference. But what is it that you need to let out so that it can be celebrated? I had to stop trying to be someone I wasn't. And then I had to start embracing that powerful woman within that I hadn't quite discovered yet, or even had a chance to get to know myself. So here's what I want to say. It's very important. This did not happen overnight. And I had to discover who I was. Then I had to accept that parts of me that I liked and didn't like, because as I began to discover myself, it was like, ooh, I'm not sure that I'm excited about that. It feels uncomfortable. And then later, I had the courage to start living that way and actually embrace those parts that I wasn't sure that I was going to like. And it turns out I do like. So instead of trying to fit in, this is the key. I began to change my environment to fit who I was. And I started wearing the clothes that made me feel confident and attended events that resonated with my bold personality. And, because the world, they're going to tell us how to do life. They're going to, for sure, every magazine and television show out there and whatever, they have a standard that they want you to live in. And they're going to tell you what, but here's the truth. Those things, when I was wearing them, I didn't feel confident. So it's okay to go against the grain of what everybody's telling you and trust your intuition. And I am going to talk more about that. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to reflect on areas of your life where you feel unseen and unappreciated. Write these down because I told you they're red flags. They are the signal. And consider that they are trying to signal to you where you are not living authentically, because those areas of discontent, they're telling you that those areas are not you, right? That's big, really big. So spend some time reflecting. Here's the really funny part. So I'll give you an example. So my sister, she lived a really big life too. And it's funny, I'm the oldest. She was the middle child. And the truth that actually my baby sister lives a big life too. It's just we we had parents that taught us to do that. But I never felt like I was living in the shadow of this sister when she became a model and she later became a pageant, queen, because at this time when she was walking in that part of her life, I had already discovered these things. So when people are like, "You're pretty, you should try to do," or if I said, "Oh, I'm just so proud of her," they'd be like, "Well, you're pretty too." And I'm like, "I didn't say I'm not. Like, I'm not trying to compare myself." And so it's really, really freeing. The reason why I'm sharing this story, it's really, really freeing when you discover exactly who you are because it hits you so deep in your core that you don't get shaken very easily by all this comparison, by everything that's going on around you. You don't have to have imposter syndrome because you know exactly who you are. So, and here's the thing. Go ahead if you want, go take a personality test because sometimes we're lying to ourselves about who we are, but it really is a cool thing when you can ask a close friend of yours who they think you are. Just tell them, throw out a couple of words that would describe me, maybe 5, and see what they say because it may surprise you what they're saying, or it may not surprise you. But it'll help you be able to reflect on your true qualities and acknowledge and maybe accept those parts that you've been suppressing because this is the key. I want to help you dig those things out. We've suppressed them way too long, right? So start making small changes to the environment when you start discovering some things. And it's all practice. And I say it's all practice because let's for instance say you want to try something different in your wardrobe because you want to show and reflect a little bit more of your personality. I did this and it's funny because the first week I went dressing bold. It terrified me to show up because I had been so used to being hidden. I think in that one day, I had received so many compliments that it terrified me. I went and threw that dress away. I could not handle being bold at the time, but it was the first step. So over time, you're practicing, you're discovering, you're trying out this, you're trying out that, and you eventually land on exactly who you are. If your wardrobe doesn't feel like a safe place to do it and it's too out there, try something as small as like your own home decor. Show and reflect your personality in your surroundings. It's really fun to do that, you know? But take a minute just to identify one small thing that you can make and change that will reflect who you are on the inside or who you think you are as you discover, right? I had to kind of dally through and figure out a few things. But it could be as simple as wearing a piece of clothing that makes you feel bold or makes you feel flowy or makes you feel dynamic and resonates with your personality. So go ahead and don't be afraid. Let yourself shine. You are on this world to shine. Don't hide it. So let's go ahead and move into the next segment here, where I'm going to talk about how I began practicing those boldness and living big, and explore those practical tips and steps on how you can take to start embracing your true self and living authentically. Your journey might just beginning, and it is so exciting. And like I said, living big, from going small to big, it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, it's very terrifying, very uncomfortable. And so it takes little baby steps to get there. And with every step you're taking, you're moving forward. So let me show you just some of the practical things that I did. Once I kind of realized who I was, or am, rather, the next challenge was practicing it. I've been saying that. And so, as something that you'll learn about me as we get to know each other a little bit better, is I am a follow through person. And so it takes me a long time to shift gears and make these changes, because I'm so committed to the old concept that I need to take some time to adapt. So when it came time to start making these changes, I knew I wanted to live authentically, but one of the first things I did was I started with my wardrobe. And like I said, I wore that green dress, and but I knew, even though I threw away the green dress and it terrified me, I knew that there were no more gray soccer mom clothes in my future. I just knew that was wrong. So everything forward was a new discovery. And, so some things I tried on and I said, no way, this is not me. And it didn't become a part of my life. But I was willing to practice. I was willing to try something new. And so I decided it was time to listen to myself, and not all the magazines, not, we have so many people who just want to tell us what to do in this world. We have, I won't even get into it because we don't need to go there. But many women, we feel stuck in our routines, we feel stuck in our habits. And that, even though they don't reflect our true nature or our true selves, it can get hard to get unstuck. And often it's right here in our mind. And that's why, these baby steps are so much easier, because your brain will try to argue with you and tell you this is wrong, it's terrifying, don't do it. And so I want you to step out of your comfort zone and start making these changes. And so if you can do this one step, one small thing at a time, it will reduce the uncomfortableness, the part that feels risky. And because the truth is, it's not risky, right? Like, our brains, they're set up kind of an old animalistic style to protect us, but there's nothing to be afraid of to try a new article of clothing or put something new in our environment for decoration, right? Because the truth of it is, we will fit in no matter what we're wearing or what we decorate our house with. And so the excitement and sense of freedom that come with living authentically, they're worth it. And I had to keep telling myself this. This was not an easy thing, but practicing meant trusting myself, trusting my instincts, something that I wasn't used to. And now I do trust my instincts. I'm able to embrace the fact that I am a follow through girl. I may not be someone who's quick to move, but you can trust me to be a follow through. And the world needs both of us, the both kinds, right? But I want you to trust your voice, to trust your intuition, and know that it is worth every step you take to move forward. Because what if living boldly and authentically is the key for me to finding true happiness and fulfillment? What if it's true for you? What if the risks we take to be ourselves are the very most important steps that we can take today? Because our children, they need to see us walking true to ourselves. The Lord and our callings and our purposes need us to stop comparing ourselves and stop trying to fit in and be someone else, and actually step in and take over and be us. That's why he put us here. So looking back, I see all the small steps I took to embrace my boldness, that made a huge difference. And it wasn't about, like I said, making these drastic, big swath changes, but about those consistent little baby things. That was how I was able to align myself. So instead of trying to make these massive changes all at once, I know that that's gratifying. I know it feels great. But start with something manageable. So start with something that's not going to overwhelm you, because often that overwhelm will stop us in our tracks and keep us from moving forward. I don't want you to procrastinate anymore, finding out who you are and identifying that and walking in it. You know, each small change, it builds confidence so that the next step brings you closer and closer and closer to that big life. A baby, it doesn't just get up and start walking. It literally has to start with holding its neck up, being able to hold its stomach to be able to sit up, and then being able to use the legs and arms in coordination to start crawling before it can try pulling itself up to start walking. So just know that that's what I'm talking about. Spend 10 minutes each day, reflecting on what truly makes you happy and fulfilled. I actually have a planner that I look at every day, and I do what's called a brain dump, or a thought process and dump, right? You just write all those thoughts down and start with those small actions and put them on your to-do list in that planner. Like, today, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to try on a couple of things just to see what I think looks best. Because here's the thing. Um, there have been times where I will go into the changing room and I will try something on, and everything about it seems so right. But once it gets on my body, there's just something that's just not just right. Something, it's a little too short at the ankle, or the fit lays wrong. Trust yourself. Don't spend the money. It's not worth it to settle. I don't want you to settle. I want you to practice and learn from each practice that you put out there. You don't have to be successful at discovering everything about your identity when you go and you do this. You just have to learn one little micro decision about that. I learned I like more substantial, more, I don't like floppy things like linen material. I love how it looks on people, but when I try it on, it just doesn't hold structure for me. And so I had to go try these things on to learn that, you know? And so the same thing is true, because usually it's our voice that comes last, but the same thing's true about your voice. When you're in conversation with a friend and you're worried about saying something, just test the water. Use your voice, start showing your opinion a little bit at a time, and you'll be surprised, because people will start coming out of the woodwork and go, me too. I didn't know you thought that. Or you're going to make them feel validated most of the time. And so just know that practice is all I'm asking you to do. These are the things about, it's kind of like trusting your gut feeling. And I know that that can feel very scary because it's not based on facts. It's not based on experience necessarily, but like I said, with pants that just were a little short on the bottom, I trust my gut feeling now, and I just go, you know what? I love every bit of it except for that. So it's not right, and it's okay to walk away. And that's how I want you to process through everything, what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, how you're going to decorate your house, how you're going to spend time with your friends, what exercise do you like, what activities and hobbies and things do you want to spend time learning? And these will all lead to much bigger aspects and bigger decisions. I shared with you just the beginning parts, but I've had to go through and have other aha moments that took me to the place of where I'm at today. So this is just the beginning. But whether it's wearing something that makes you feel confident, or speaking up in a group, or talking with a friend, trying on something new, trying to eat something new, those steps, it's just so worth it, because you're on a pathway on your life and you only get to live this life once. Why live it living someone else's dream or thoughts or process or expectations of you? Get on that pathway, live the life, and stop hiding, right? So today we've journeyed through my transformation from feeling kind of overshadowed, living small, to discovering who I am, walking true, bold, and loving and embracing that part. We talked about my upbringing and the pivotal moments that brought me to this place that opened my eyes, and also the practical steps on how to start this process. So I want you to remember it all starts with acknowledging who you are, where you're coming from, what has shaped you, why you think this way, because your mindset is where the foundation is on all of this. And if you don't spend time learning those things about yourself, you won't be able to unlock and change those thoughts about yourself. So look at who you are. What makes you unique? What part of your upbringing, you know, um, sets you apart? My parents were go-getters. They lived big lives. So, like I said, me and my sisters, that's all we know how to do because that's what our experience is, right? And so I want you to take that, turn it around, and start living intentionally. Start being kind to yourself. We've talked about self-love and all the things, and I'm leading into this because I want you to love yourself so much that it is worth doing the uncomfortable, worth pushing through to truly get to the place where you live your big, audacious life. It's not a destination, it really is a journey. And so I want you to celebrate every step, every progress, and continually to keep celebrating and getting out of that comfort zone. You have the power to redefine your life. And it's not set in stone. It's okay to change your mind, but I want you to live it on your terms. And so I challenge you to take that step this week, towards embracing just even one little area of who your true self is. If you're having a hard time discovering what your true self is, don't worry. Next week, we're going to dive into identifying who you truly are. And we'll explore how to stop compromising and trying to be like everyone else, and how to avoid that comparison trap that feeds into our low self-esteem. So by the end of this series, you're going to feel so confident in your identity and ready to embrace your true self. I don't want you to miss it. So mark your calendars. Invite a friend. If you know a friend that needs this too, please tell them about it. Have them join the Facebook group. And also, if your friend, you feel like, man, I know who their true self is, but it's hard for me to tell them that they're not living true to themselves. Just tell them, hey, I'm on this journey. I need you to be on this journey with me just to support me. They'll jump in, right? Because people love supporting. We want to be a part of each other's lives. So thank you for joining me today. Remember to like, share, subscribe, so that you can stay updated on all these new episodes coming out weekly on Wednesdays, 1:30 p.m. live in the Facebook group. And don't forget to go to the Facebook group to download the workbook for this week that goes with this episode, so that, we can be able to go deeper together because we've done all the exercises, and we can do this together. The work is not easy, so don't do it alone, but I'll see you next week.